Berg and Litwin model of organization change and performance. In this model, they actually shared how change, how if you divide the all activities within the organization at different levels into small boxes, it is so easy for us to track the interactions between the different boxes. And also an important aspect we discussed yesterday was these top four boxes actually influence your transformational changes, and lower ones actually influence more of transactional changes, right? And we discussed the role of these four structure as well as management practices and system yesterday. Now let us today pick up or start with work units, like work unit climate. So when we talk of work unit climate, what does it mean? When we talk of climate, it talks about environment, okay? Environment. Whenever we talk about work unit environment, it talks about the feelings of people, right? Feelings of people regarding what? Regarding organization or workplace, right? So when you are looking at job satisfaction, it actually is describing the workplace climate or workplace environment of a particular organization. Since environment or climate is very specific to the context, to the stakeholders involved in the context, and to the process, therefore this is very customized depending on the particular organization, nature of work, the demographic profile and KSAs of people involved in the process, and how they feel about things. Because feeling is something, you remember, it very much depends on our perception, right? We perceive and then we feel. And perception is very much influenced by our value systems, our knowledge, skill and expertise, right? So therefore, when we talk about work unit climate, we talk about, how the organizations or the people in the organizations feel about their workplace. So therefore, your job satisfaction, happiness, your conflicts, your engagement at workplace, all these things, the attitudes you can collect from the work unit climate. And now if you see the arrows which are influencing work unit climate, you see that the structure of organization influences work unit. How? Now if you are in an organization with hierarchical structure, the kind of feelings people have will be different from an organization where the structure is more flat in nature. Organization which is more mechanistic, the people or the communication will be more from top to bottom in form of orders, isn't it? Orders, notices, rules, regulations, practices. But if an organization is following, less mechanistic structure or more organic structure, in such kind of organization, the communication will be from both the ways. Both way communication will be entertained. And whenever there is both way communication, that means communication is moving from down to top. In this cases, people have more voice, isn't it? You are free to express your thoughts, your feelings, your apprehensions, your assumptions, discuss it with your boss or the higher level people, and your participation or the participation of employees will be more in decision making process, right? But if your organization structure is mechanistic, remember, more information flows from top to bottom, and participation of employees, frontline people or middle-level people in decision-making, organization, crucial decision-making is very, very, very low, right? So this is how structure is influenced. Similarly, if you like look at management practices influences climate, you know, if we are the satisfaction level of employee, or you talk about feelings, you talk about work life balance. Work life balance is very much influenced by management practices, and these practices, in other words, are influenced by leadership. So if in your organization the leadership style is, you know, very autocratic in nature, definitely the management practices will be very strict and will be, you know, in a more supportive to the visions and norms of the leader and the organization board members. And you know, there will be very small space for people to pull in, or employees to pull in their thoughts, ideas, and what they want. So definitely in such conditions, work life balance will be low. You know, people will have poor work life balances. There will be more stress, more mental health issues, physical health issues in such workplaces. Whereas if the leadership is very, you know, participative kind of a leadership, your management practices will involve you more in the decision making process. And definitely if you have you have the authority to make decisions regarding your own work, how you carry out the work, how you decide the timeline of your work, then definitely, you know, the work-life balance of people will go down. So here we see how they are related. Similarly, you look at systems, policies, and practices. These management practices generate system, policies, and practices, and they also, you know, decide your work unit climate. So take a small thing like suppose overtime, or take working from home, which people are experiencing nowadays. So working from in case of working from home, if your superior or your organization gives you an opportunity to make decisions like selecting the timings of meetings, or selecting or asking you for suitable time for meeting, will you be more comfortable? Or every time, you know, even in the evening, suppose you get an information of some meeting and something which can, you know, pour in any time because you are working from home, is more convenient? Obviously the first one, right? So organizations where the policies and practices are more flexible, remember, flexible, people will be less stressed. The stress level of people will be less, so work-life balance will be better. So this is just an example explaining you how work unit climate is influenced by all these boxes above. Now what happens if you are feeling, so you have two options here, right? If you look at feelings, feeling may be good or may be bad, or say it can be moderate also. Okay? So if your feelings in the workplace are, say, good, suppose it's good because your organization is flexible in nature, the management practices involve you in their process, the structure is more organic, then in such circumstances, we assume that the employee will feel positive about the organization, and we feel good about the organization, right? So in such circumstances, what about your motivation? Definitely your motivation level, or the efforts you will put in, or your desires or your willingness towards the organization, the work assigned to you will be high, isn't it? If this is good, then this is high. If this is low, then motivation level is low for you, right? Similarly, you come to from motivation deviate to individual needs and values. Now, many times I have discussed with you something called social exchange theory, right? Social exchange theory actually sets the premises of the reason why employee comes to an organization to work, because he has certain needs and values, and he or she is expecting actually the organization to fulfill her needs, and at the same time is expecting values to remain befitting, right? The values of the individual should fit with the value of the organization, right? In such circumstances motivation will be high. But if there is a contradiction, that means the organization is not fulfilling my needs. You again take this example. Yesterday we took the example of the mass scale of migration, reverse migration that was observed during the lockdown period. What made many of the skilled people come back, and then after 1 month again many of the people went back to their their organizations. If you have heard about personal experiences of maybe somebody they'll tell you the story that actually after 1 to 2 months of lockdown, the organization stopped taking care of these employees, and they were more in a chaos state with scattered family, etc. So they all went back to villages. But then when there was unlock, and the organization were told to start their production process or services, these organizations faced the problem of severe scarcity of people to carry out work, human resource. So what these organizations did, they actually again called back their employees by attracting them through better remuneration, through air tickets even to come back. I came across many such stories, experiences of people. So what I'm talking here about is your expectations is related with motivation, and motivation actually regulates our efforts, and the whole thing lies in the effort. You put in effort, productivity will high. If services will be of good quality, efficiency will improve, effectiveness improve. So all good things will happen here if your effort is good, which is controlled by you as an individual as well as the organization through work unit climate, right? Now here there is another dimension, that is task requirements and abilities. Now we have time and again discussed in our class that performance is a function of ability and motivation, right? So these two things actually lead to performance. Performance is observed here in form of organizational and individual outcomes in form of, as I just mentioned, better quality of products, better quality of services, creativity at workplace, higher turnover, higher revenue, whatever metrics your organization may use to capture the individual and organizational performance, right? So this completes an understanding of the Burke and Litwin's model. So I will be posting you a case study where you try to evaluate the case in light of this model, right? It's not very difficult. You don't have to totally picturize and memorize it. Just remember the topmost part, the lowermost part in terms of performance, and in between this part that controls the work unit, the individual's motivation, needs, values, and tasks. So when these are all aligned, definitely performance will come up. So as an organization, now let us look at how does it help you as a organization change agent. Suppose you are a consultancy firm and you have tied up with another organization where you are supposed to, you know, work on bringing about some change in the organization. Or suppose you are playing the role of an HR manager who is carrying out some transformational or transactional change in the organization. Then as a change agent, this diagram actually will try to navigate you through what all things you need to capture in what all informations you need to capture, where all you need to conduct meetings or develop understanding among people, or you know, generate answers to, you know, remember the driving force and the resistance force. So these answers you can get better if you have an understanding of this Burke and Litwin's model, which is, you know, which has been empirically tested. These are relationships which you see here with help of arrows. These relationships have been tested by researchers empirically by collecting data, and they have observed that it works, right? So therefore, this diagram is a very good tool in hands of all change agents who are required to carry out change and development in organization. Another approach that I talked to you in the beginning, this is totally, see, till now we have discussed, you know, the systems theory. Remember in my first class, in change and development, I told you when we talk about change or managing change, I should write it managing change. Then in that case, we manage change normally through one is systems theory. In systems theory, we actually discussed this Burke and Litwin's model, then Nedler's model. We discussed Levin's model as well. Okay, now today we will discuss socially constructed, write it down somewhere, socially constructed theory. Now, this is, you know, altogether very, very different from systems theory. In systems theory, the main components were what? The main components of system theory were the input, output, throughput, and environment, isn't it? These were the four more main components which talked about the relations between this component and tried to search for a solution to bring about change, right? But the socially constructed theory is absolutely, or I should say totally different from what we have discussed in systems theory. Right, now let us try to understand, as the word indicates, socially means what? Socially means, you know, group of people. When you talk about social society, it talks about interactions between a group of people. Am I correct now? Interactions between group of people. If there is no interaction, then we don't call it social, you know. That's why we say, oh, that guy is very unsocial, because when I'm saying somebody is unsocial, that means the guy is not mixing up with people. When I'm saying mixing up with people, it refers to interactions, having interactions with people. Again, if I want to, you know, make this more easy, what are interactions? Interactions are, yeah, what are these interactions? Interactions are nothing but conversations, right? Am I right? Interactions are conversations between people about maybe any issue. See, now we all are, you know, so working from home with using all these digital technology, using digital technology and also many of devices. So it has changed the medium of our conversations, but we still converse, isn't it? So much of WhatsApp, apps, so much of Instagram, so much of social media, Twitter, Facebook accounts, or your, you know, whatever we are doing through the studying through the Zoom platform, Google Meet platform, whatever, all these are actually devices that are facilitating conversation. So the socially constructed theory focuses on this conversation or interaction nature of people, and it says that people create, put down somewhere, people create, people develop, and infuse. Infuse means perceive. You can say, you know, perceive based on what? Based on, you know, these interactions. So you and I as human being try to develop our understanding about anything with help of with help of interactions or conversations about the particular thing. Right now, when we are doing interactions of conversations, what influences our conversations? What factors influence? Just try to understand the concept. Okay, what factors influence interactions? Okay.
Communication skills.
Yeah, what factors? Your culture, my culture, isn't it? Culture is what? Culture is our beliefs, our values, right? Our beliefs and values guide what? They guide our perception. Okay, so let me start it and make it easy again. Our perception, we look at things, whenever we look at things, we look through our own lens. I hope you agree with that. When I say with our own lens, that means my beliefs, my values, what is important to me, how I think about a particular thing. The moment you ask me anything about, say this pen, right? I hope you are able to see this pen. So if I ask you anything about this pen, I will try to give you my views depending on my experience with the pen, my beliefs, and my the value I give to this pen. Now suppose I take this to a very tribal area where people don't know how to read and write, and I show them this pen. You know, their perception or their interpretation about this pen will be much different than what interpretations we will have. And why there will be so much of difference? Just because this has a different value for us, and this of course doesn't have any value for a person who doesn't know how to write, right? So therefore, I hope you are able to capture when we say socially constructed theory, that means the people try to develop a meaning of the discussion through their conversations, perceptions, or interactions. Through this, they try to generate something called meaning. Remember, we many times say, you know, X things is more meaningful to you, but it may be less meaningful to me. The reason is because that particular thing may have more value for you, but for me, the thing may have less value. Or some different kind of people, diverse kind of people make different interactions or give different conversations, or their sense making or meaning is different. Note down this word, sense making. And this word sense making was for the first time used by Vick in 1995, where he said that sense making refers to interactions people make about a particular thing. And sense making varies from person to person, people from different cultural backgrounds, people with different abilities even. One is Berger and Luckman in 1967 actually came out with a book on the social construction of reality. Right, these guys, Berger and Luckman, long back in 1967, came out with this book on the social construction of reality. The assumption is reality is something which is absolute truth, right? Absolute truth is something which is real. Now, the beautiful part and the twist in reality is, are we always able to see reality? Do we always see the absolute truth? In other words, instead of asking, do you see reality? I ask you, do you always see the absolute truth? No. Remember, we never ever see the absolute truth. Our truth is presumed reality. When I say, my God, whatever incident I am explaining you right now is, is reality, and this really happened with me. Remember, at that point of time, whatever I am claiming to be reality is my presumed reality, because I saw it or I heard about it with my prejudices, with my assumptions, with my cultural values. So what I am presenting to you as reality is my presumed reality. And my presumed reality will be much different from your presumed reality, because your prejudices are different, your biases are different, your cultural background is different, your values and beliefs and knowledge is also different. Knowledge is an important, is a very important factor in explaining reality. That is why the government tries to, impart free education to children. Why? Because when we strongly believe that educating people improves their ability to look at reality, the ability to look at things happening. When we say something is a myth, for example, when we say something is a myth, or or blind faith, look at this word, blind faith or myth. What are they actually? For some people, they are absolute reality. They claim it to be absolutely real, right? But when we become, when we acquire a lot of scientific knowledge, scientific acumen, we believe in, scientific way of doing things, then we negate this myth and blind faith. So what is happening here? Education is actually changing the way we look at things. Are you getting it? But remember one thing very clearly, the absolute truth doesn't change. This remains the same, but only the lens with which we are looking at absolute truth, which we call presumed reality, changes depending on the demographic profile, depending on the knowledge, depending on the thought process, thinking, etc. of any individual. All right. So now this presumed reality is actually our social construction of reality. So what is happening? What is the main message I wanted to give you was, reality is nothing but constructed by us. Right? We, from our way of looking at things, from our knowledge point of view, from our likes, dislikes, we try to construct a reality. And when we construct this reality, we communicate this reality to others. So therefore, people who are like me, please try to understand this. This is very effective in understanding relationships also, right? So if people who are like me will easily take my understanding of reality, will share presumed reality with me. But people who are very different from me in terms of knowledge, in terms of skill, in terms of scientific acumen, in terms of, you know, social constructs, in terms of culture, etc., their social construction will be very, very different. Okay, and they will look at the things very differently. But these things are not changing the absolute truth. Are they changing the absolute truth? No. But none of us is actually looking at absolute truth. Whatever we are looking at, whatever we are calling real, is actually a social construction of the reality, right? And now we need to understand how this is, you know, how this makes sense, or how is this understanding meaningful in organization change and development. Why this discussion is important, and what sense does it make in the paper organization change and development we are looking into. Now here comes the twist. In systems theory, we discussed that, you know, there is a very fine, clear-cut layout between input, output, throughput, and environment. But here, the people who believe in social construction approach of handling organization change and development, they say that environment is also looked upon people differently. Okay, different people make different meaning out of the environment. Interactions and languages are the main issues which need to be tackled when you are trying to understand social constructed categories, issues, or themes in an organization, which has a lot of influence of something called culture here. See, and culture is nothing but shared beliefs and assumptions of people, and this culture actually influences your practices. And that is the reason why lockdown, especially, it's a beautiful example in today's concept, in today's context, why different countries approach towards lockdown was different. If you look at America, lockdown was declared, then how people reacted to it, what things were under lockdown norms, what were not. It's much different from India. And it is, again, you look at the Nordic countries, it was much different. You take the example of Singapore, it was totally different. You look at Germany, it was quite different. Try to collect some information from, you know, news channels, and you see lockdown was treated differently in different countries. And one of the basic reason for treating it differently is, one is culture, right? And in culture, something we will discuss in next semester, but like I want to, you know, remark little bit or comment little bit on it. When we talk about culture, one example of lockdown in culture is your control, right? Which I just wrote it here. That control, many culture believes in controlling behavior of people, right? Whereas many cultures, especially you look at western part of the world, you look at Nordic countries, they never try to, you know, make very rigid or strong rules and regulations. Why they do not make rigid, strong rules, regulations? Because they don't believing in controlling people, right? Another important factor is risk averse. You know, risk averse. Some people are risk taking. Some people try to avoid risk. So when you try to avoid risk, you will always design more stringent rules and regulations so that risk is minimized. Okay. Whereas where people are more risk taking, pro-risk taking, there they will actually devise very less rules, regulations, or focus on very less those factors which actually leads you to risk. I will give you an example of entrepreneurship. If you look at entrepreneurship, you in general, if worldwide study is made, it is observed that people of America, Europe are high in entrepreneurship attribute, whereas people from collective countries like India, Japan, China, this part of the world, Asians, if you see, the entrepreneurship attribute is less or low among people. The reason is because people in this region are more, risk avoiding types, and if you are more risk avoiding types, you always try to find out a safe niche for yourself. So when you are looking for a safe niche, you actually put in lot of rules and regulations so that the risk can be risk can be avoided, right? So this is just an example to make you understand how culture plays crucial role in devising practices in various countries. Like now, I was going to make you understand what is the value of social construction approach for OD practitioners. Because let me remind you again, we are studying this for organization development, right? So what is the main value? Why is it important? Yesterday, when I did a thorough discussion on, trying to understand reality. So whatever is real for me or for you is dependent, or we define it by our own assumptions, our own beliefs, how or which lens we are looking into it. That is the way we describe something, right? Now, what sense or what utility it has or what value it has for OD practitioners? We need to understand that the first value, it actually helps to explain human behavior, right? If I ask you to explain behavior of one of your friends, will it be easy for you to explain the behavior in numbers, or will it be easy for you to describe the behavior? Obviously, description of behavior will be easier and it will be more closer to fact also, right? And this subjective way of defining things is social construction. And this social construction is a very, very useful tool in human behavior. And remember, again, as a big challenge for HR people, the coming of artificial intelligence, right? When we talk more about artificial intelligence, we talk more about digitalization. The problem in HR is when you are putting everything in numbers and algorithms, is it, is it sufficient to capture people behavior? Is it sufficient enough to predict? Because remember, prediction is very important part, right? When we discussed Burke and Litwin's model, I told you prediction is a very, very important part because all these models, theories, conceptualizations, and are preparing you mentally to take better decisions. It will help by taking right kind of OD intervention, right? In third, fourth unit, we will be discussing a lot of OD interventions. So intervention is nothing but a practice or some tools and mechanisms that will be used to bring about change. So what tool to be used, where to be used, these questions can be answered better if you are able to capture or predict human behavior. Helps to, you write down these points, articulate, helps to articulate complexities by collecting interpreting, we are not analyzing directly, interpreting and sharing information. If you guys recollect little bit, in your first semester managerial skills class, we saw when we took up the content called problem solving. Remember, there was there are two ways in which we solve problem. One is the regular problem solving process, that you diagnose a problem, collect data, analyze data, then you make your conclusions and you give a presentation and you deliberate on the action, right? And what was the other way? The other way was a creative approach to problem solving, in which we studied incubation also, isn't it? How, if you look at the factors of creativity, you can see how, thinking about a particular problem, sharing it with people, you get various ideas, and that helps you to understand the various characteristics of problem. This characteristics of problem cannot be captured by the normal problem solving method, which is followed with the systems approach, right? Whereas with social construction approach, you can actually collect, interpret, and share data. So again, when we look at collect, interpret, and share data, it is mainly focused on interactions, or it is focused on conversations. Okay, conversations. When I'm saying conversations refer to the interaction I'm making with many stakeholders, right? When I'm saying conversation, I'm talking about stakeholders. So if you look at the systems approach, system approach is very, it has very clear boundaries. You have input, you move to throughput, then you move to output, you just talk to the stakeholders which are involved in that particular process. But in case of social construction approach, there is no limitations. So you put in, you move forward and reverse, you talk to stakeholders, try to make sense out of the discussion you make to people, helps you to understand the issue in much better way compared to the systems approach, right? So now let me move to the third important value attached to this approach is involvement or participation of members in an organization. Very important. So, the systems approach never clearly talks about involvement of people. If the intervention says that you conduct a meeting, then people will conduct a meeting, otherwise not. But social construction approach is grounded on involvement of people. Because these conversations, when you are making these conversations with the members, you are making these conversations with people, right? So I bring about change with you, including you, making them more inclusive, in decision making. Then what will happen? You will now never withdraw from the decision, right? Because you are a part and parcel of making that decision. So remember, again, as in future HR practitioner, if you involve the stakeholders in your decision making process, you involve them in all the levels of decision making, then your decision making will be easy to implement. Remember, it increases ease of implementation. That is your multidimensional relationships. Multi-dimensional relationships. But what happens in system approach? It restricts the opportunity of conversation. it restricts the relationship. It all restricts the relationship to move only in the typical formal structure of the organization. Whereas social construction approach gives you the opportunity or freedom to of multidimensional. That means you can talk to all the stakeholders, you can involve all the stakeholders in your process of trying to understand or implement change. So when you involve everyone, then definitely the outcomes or the quality of decision will be better, right? Let us move to the fifth one, which says that OD practitioners see the importance of communication in creating change. So the importance of communication in creating change is highlighted. If you recall those models of Tushman or your Burke and Letwin, it hardly talked about communication. You know, time and again it talked about leadership, practices, work environment, people, needs, motivation, but it hardly talked about the importance of communication. You know, now also if you look at so many webinars and, you know, people are writing on the blogs the importance of communication in this work from home. Actually, work from home is somewhat, don't you feel as a student, I feel it as a teacher, that somewhere, you know, the ease of communication has reduced. Ease of communication has reduced, and if you recollect the managerial skill classes, the communication last unit we discussed communication. In communication, non-verbal, remember, non-verbal communication has a very important role to play. You know, collaborativeness is a challenge when communication is not good. When communication is not good, collaboration is a challenge. And this is how they are trying to, you know, through various activities, through various, you know, programs, meetings, they're trying to develop collaboration in spite of people staying in their workplaces, right? But how it helps OD? It helps OD because communication, if is well managed, then in that case, lot of information and clarity is obtained. Remember, communication gives clarity, right? And this is a very, very important input. Now let us move to the last point that adds value, that is sense making. Sense making logics are, you know, better handled. Sense making is better handled by social construction approach. Why by social construction approach sense making is better? Because you are able to use your, you know, you can your role can be explained better. You can, you know, the processes can be explained better, and the conversations taking place between people can be interpreted, and this naturally increases the sense making ability. Okay, this increases inclusion as well as it increases sense making ability. So therefore, these are the benefits that social construction approach has, which we do not find in systems approach. Now just tell me, now suppose you are a HR consultant of a particular firm, and a company, ABC company, has called you to bring about some change in the organization. Which approach will you use? So ideally, which approach should you use? Remember, this is very important. Use both the approaches. Don't restrict yourself as an HR practitioner or as a HR manager or as a consultant to only use one approach. Remember, both this approach, when I am saying, that means use systems approach as well as social construction approach. Resisting forces and driving forces. Right, it talked about resisting forces and driving forces. So these forces you can capture well with social construction approach. Remember, in social construction approach can very clearly present with you the resisting and driving forces. So if you can capture these forces well, then you can design organization development interventions which will be helpful to manage change.